Now let's discuss transitions in DaVinci Resolve. Currently on the left we have the media pool showing. I'll click this button to open the effects library. Let's hide the media pool by clicking here. So this is my effects library. In Toolbox, the first option is video transitions. So these are the transitions I have in my videos. They're divided into multiple categories. Let's apply a transition. I need the transition to affect these two clips. So I'll zoom in, click on the cross dissolve transition and drag it to the edit point. Note that I did not release the mouse button yet. The transition has 3 different positions. If I drag it to the edit point exactly, it's added to both clips, and it's affecting both clips at the same time. If I drag it to the left, it's mainly affecting the clip on the left, and if I drag it to the right, now it's affecting mainly the clip to the right. So let's add it in the middle. I can also hold the transition from one of its sides and make it longer or shorter. So let's take a look at the transition. I'll place the playhead here in play, and this is the transition from one clip to the next. Great. If I click on the transition, I have this icon showing here. If I click it, this is the keyframe editor for this transition. If I click on this icon here, these are my keyframes. Let me pull this down a bit for this to be more clear. I can click on this point, for example. So I have this point selected. This will change how fast my transition happens over time. So while this point is selected, I know it's selected because it's orange. If I click this button, now I have a handle that allows me to change how fast the transition happens over time. For example, I can give it a really slow curve. So let's place the playhead here and play and notice how the transition happens over time. Let's click on the icon again to close the keyframe editor. And let's bring this back up again. Now I have this transition selected. I can tell by the orange color around it. So if I click out, the transition now is not selected. And if I click on this clip, now I'm selecting this clip, or I can click on this clip to select it. But if I click on the transition itself, now I'm selecting the transition, and I can simply hit backspace on the keyboard to delete the transition. I can also right click on any edit point to get these options. I can add a cross dissolve transition with different durations. So for example, I can add a 6 frame, 12 frame, 24 or 48 frame cross dissolve transition. So if I click, now I have a cross dissolve transition with a length of 48 frames, and this is not set in stone. I can again select one of the sides of the transition to make it shorter or longer. The right click thing is just a shortcut to add transitions faster. Let's select the transition and delete it. Now note that when I click on the edit point, I have a green color on the edit point, which means that this edit point is currently being selected. So I can hover over any transition here, right click and add to selected edit points and clips. If I click, this particular transition was just added to this edit point. Let's take a look at it. I'll place the playhead here and play, and this is the transition. Let's again select the transition and delete it. What if I wanted to change the default transition that shows when I right click on one of the edit points? It's currently cross dissolve. I can select any transition like cross iris here, for example, right click and select set as standard transition. And now I have this orange color next to it, which means this is the default transition now. And if I right click on an edit point, now instead of cross dissolve, now I can add a cross iris transition. Great, let's undo. Now, let's say that you modified your transition anyway. So for example, you made this transition this long and you changed the keyframes somehow, and you don't want to repeat this operation every time you add this transition. You just want to save this transition as a preset. So you can use the same transition exactly on any other edit point. I can right click on the transition and select create transition preset. And you can save this as my transition and hit OK. And now if you scroll all the way down, you have a new transition added in the category that is called user. So this is the transition you just saved with all of its properties. One last thing, let's delete this transition, zoom out a bit, and I'll select multiple clips. So now I can select any transition, right click on it, and click on add to selected edit points and clips. Resolve will add this transition to all these clips. However, in order to add this particular transition, Resolve need to trim some of the clips in order to create media for these transitions. And Resolve is giving me the option to skip these clips or to trim the clips. I'll select trim, and now Resolve just added this particular transition to all these clips. And this is how you add transitions in DaVinci Resolve.